This is Bruno Bianchi Sarcone. I run Spainguru.es, and this is the Spanish Non-Lucrative Visa webinar. Today is Wednesday, 24th September 2025. And the way this webinar is structured is a timeline before the application, during, and after the approval of that application. We're going to go through some definitions, talk about consulates, third parties used by the consulates to process the visas, different immigration status, tourist, resident, tax considerations, eligibility, documentation, and requirements for the non-lucrative visa application. And then we're going to go in depth into the timing, the application process, and then how you arrive to Spain. Some tips and steps, clear steps on your arrival in Spain, renewal process, long-term residence after 5 years, citizenship, potentially, and some pathways to transition to work permit. The content of this webinar is for information purposes only and is not legal advice. The requirements listed here are not official. Please check your specific consulate and BLS office requirements. But before that, a little bit about Spainguru.es. Our objective is facilitating the relocation process for English-speaking foreigners to Spain since 2014. We have wonderful reviews on Trustpilot and on Google, so you are in very good hands. You can use Spainguru.es for absolutely free. Everything is free on Spainguru, except when you contact my vetted partners. But you can join our weekly newsletter every Monday, where I feature top discussions on social media, investigation blog posts, most watched video of the week, YouTube channel with more than 1,000 videos, half of them about the non-lucrative visa, blog with almost 2,000 articles, and a vibrant community with an aggregated total of 150,000 members, where the Spanish non-lucrative visa Facebook group is the biggest non-lucrative visa group out there that I highly recommend you joining today. Here you have the link and QR code to join the group. It's almost 24,000 members as of today. And there's many other sections that you can use for free. As I said, you can join 6 webinars in total every 15 days or 3 weeks apart. Join the newsletter and the Move to Spain checklist. And recently I released the Spanish destinations featuring 13 cities and areas in Spain, with a lot of free tools so you can compare those areas and choose where to move to. And if you decide to go with professional help, you can find immigration experts, tax advisors. Those two, I highly recommend you engaging with at least those two before taking the decision of moving to Spain. Then there are financial planners, tax accountants, non-lucrative visa compliant health insurance, medical certificates, sworn translators, apostille services, all those needed for the non-lucrative visa application, bank accounts, money transfer services, you'll need those, property rentals potentially, mortgages if you plan to buy property in Spain, and so many more services. All that on Spainguru.es. You go to the top menu and you push services. Now, let's go with the timeline of the presentation. First of all, what is the Spanish non-lucrative visa? This is a visa for non-EU citizens who can financially support themselves and who don't need to work in Spain. And there's 2 rules or 2 laws that define this visa. The most important in hierarchy is the main Ley Orgánica 4 del año 2000, okay? And then there is the regulation of this law, also known as the Reglamento de Extranjería, which is a bylaw, and it is lower in hierarchy, okay? That specifies and gives more details about how to implement the main organic law. What changed recently is the smaller in hierarchy regulation of the law, or Reglamento de Extranjería, that took effect on May 20th, 2025. And it's important that you understand there is a difference in hierarchy because this has deep implications into several things that we're going to go through today. Let's talk about the consulates, because as you probably know, you cannot apply for this visa or residency in Spain. You have to do it from a Spanish consulate abroad, okay? And on Spainguru.es, I have created a dedicated page for each of the consulates in these 4 countries, USA, UK, Canada, and Australia, okay? And why it's so important to have a dedicated page that you can find on Spainguru.es/Spain non-lucrative visa? Because every consulate is different. Not only every country is different, but every consulate is different. And it's very important that you follow first-hand experiences of people applying from your consulate, and also you check the official requirements in English and Spanish and BLS office at your specific consulate, because they differ greatly. So as I said, if you go to guides, visa guides on Spainguru.es, select Spain non-lucrative visa guide, you go to NLV consulate, you go to your country, select your consulate, and for example, this is Los Angeles consulate. Here you can see several first-hand experiences that you can read, and you will see that people were asked requirements that are not listed online. So this is why it's so important that you read those first-hand experiences and you join the community and ask your questions, always mentioning your consulate. Okay. Now, many consulates use the services of BLS International. This is an Indian company, it's a private company that is in the Indian Stock Exchange with presence in 66 countries. What they do is they process the visas for different countries. Okay, Spain is one of their clients, but not all the consulates use BLS International. In the UK, the 3 consulates, Edinburgh, Manchester, and UK, use BLS International. In the US, some of the consulates use BLS International. For example, Miami, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Houston, as far as I know. But for example, New York City doesn't use BLS International for the non-lucrative visa processing. Therefore, what these guys do is that they prepare the file and they put it in order. They check that all the documentation is there, and they send it to the consulate in their city. Okay, but it is the consulate who really processes the visa. What BLS International does is to receive the file, put everything in order, check that nothing is missing, and then send it to the consulate. But these guys are not the ones taking the decision to approve you or not. Okay, but they will channel and they will process all the documentation before. Okay, so make sure to understand whether your consulate, the one that serves the area where you're a legal resident, uses BLS International for the non-lucrative visa processing. Another thing I didn't mention is that you cannot really choose which consulate you apply from. You have to be legal resident within the jurisdiction that a specific Spanish consulate is serving. Or if you're a dual passport holder, for example, you hold American and Colombian passport, potentially you could apply from a Spanish consulate in Colombia using your Colombian passport. This also has happened, but it is not the most common thing. Now, something to have in mind is the Schengen area. This is a 29 European country region, okay, or group of countries, which is internally borderless. It's important that you understand which countries are in this area, because it will also have implications on how you arrive to Spain and what you have to do in order to, have a smooth process. Okay. Now, let's talk about the different immigration status. First of all, you can enter the Schengen area as a tourist, okay? And if you hold the British, British passport, US passport, Canada passport, Australia passport, you don't have to apply for a tourist visa, for a Schengen tourist visa or Schengen visa. If you hold, for example, Filipino passport, you have to apply for a Schengen visa to enter the Schengen area as a tourist, okay? Now, you can stay maximum 90 days within a 180-day rolling period, okay, in that area as a tourist, okay? Then, before this happens, you have to leave the Schengen area, okay? Now, if you want to stay longer than 90 days in any of the Schengen countries, you need to obtain at least a temporary residency. Temporary residency in Spain is all the residency permits that will grant you permit to stay in Spain for up to 5 years, okay? More than 5 years is considered to be a long-term residency. So the non-lucrative visa, which is the paper that is stick to your passport, once you enter Spain, will give you the right to obtain the non-lucrative residency, okay? And that residency, if you renew it, okay, after 1 year and for 2 more years and for 2 more years, for a total of 5 years, will give you the non-lucrative residency for up to 5 years, okay? After that, potentially you could be eligible, if you comply with the requirements, for the long-term residency, okay, which is much better than the non-lucrative residency, right? So also something is that when you get your non-lucrative visa, you will have a number on that visa. That is the número de identificación de extranjero, okay? And this is a number that Spain uses to identify you, okay, as a foreigner, right? And that number will never change. But when you obtain the non-lucrative visa, they will assign you this number automatically, okay? You could obtain this number before if you wanted. It costs $10, okay, to obtain it. If, for example, you would wish to buy property in Spain without becoming a resident, okay, or without obtaining a visa, you just want to buy, for example, a holidays house in Spain, you have to have a NIE number, okay? But if you obtain the NLV, you're going to get the NIE number automatically, right? Now, the NIE is the number, okay? The number, that's it, okay? Now, the TIE card is the residency plastic card that will have the NIE number on it with your photo and your name, etc., etc., okay? Now, as we said, the non-lucrative visa is for non-EU passport holders. If you are a citizen of the European country, the EU country, or you are a spouse, okay, or couple of an EU passport holder, then the non-lucrative visa is not for you, okay? There is, you can obtain as an EU passport holder residency in Spain. You have the right to be a resident in Spain, okay? And if you plan to retire in Spain without income, okay, so either you work in Spain, or you study in Spain, or you retire in Spain, right? If you're a EU passport holder, you can do any of those three. You will have different requirements, but there are much easier or softer requirements than a non-lucrative visa. So if you have the possibility to obtain a new passport, then go for it, better than a non-lucrative visa. Or if you're a spouse, you can piggyback the EU passport holder, okay, residency, obtaining a tarjeta de ciudadano de la Unión Europea, okay, the familiar de ciudadano de la Unión Europea, and you will get the residency permit. You don't have to renew it within those 5 years. You will get a work permit, okay, and the financial threshold is 7,200 euros, okay? So it is much better than a non-lucrative visa. So if that is your situation, go for it, right? Another consideration to talk about is the tax residency in Spain, right? What happens when you become a tax resident in Spain? You will be liable to pay taxes on your global income and potentially on the net value of your assets to Spanish tax authorities. And when do you become a Spanish tax resident, as you know, on the views of the Spanish tax authorities? If you spend physically in Spain more than 183 days within a calendar year, from January 1st to December 31st, which is different from an immigration year. Immigration year is a natural year. So if you enter Spain in June, your immigration year goes from June to June, which is different from the calendar tax year, right? Now, those 183 days don't need to be consecutive, and it doesn't matter if you are in Spain as a tourist, holding a residency, holding a visa, it doesn't matter. Physical presence counts, and 1 minute in Spanish soil counts as a full day, right? So try to not be right on the limit. Now, if you spend less than that time, there are also two other conditions that could turn you into a tax resident in Spain. The second one is if your main income source comes from Spain also, or if your family lives in Spain, you could also be a tax resident in Spain, okay? Now, if you're moving from one country to another and it is not clear where you're a tax resident, refer to the double taxation agreements between the first country and Spain, because there are tiebreaker rules to understand whether you're a tax resident or not. And always engage with a tax professional, which you can find on Spainguru.es. That can help you understand what's going to happen with your taxes during your year moving to Spain. Just a quick overview about taxes. Income tax, first of all, you pay on June 30th your annual income tax. There are progressive rates that range from 19% to 47%. And then there is the Form 720. The first year in which you become a Spanish tax resident, you will disclose your assets outside of Spain by different categories. So if any category like bank accounts or properties, okay, real estate is over 50,000 euros, you will have to disclose it at the beginning of the year to Spanish tax authorities. Then there is the wealth tax, which is a regional tax based on the value of your assets, of your net assets, okay? And since it is regional, there are 17 regions in Spain. Depending where you move, it's going to have a lower threshold or no wealth tax at all. For example, Madrid and Andalusia have, in practice, they don't have the regional wealth tax, okay? Now, there is also the national solidarity tax that kicks in at the 3 million euros net value of your assets, of your wealth, but it is nationwide, okay? So always read the double taxation agreements between your country of origin or wherever you could potentially be liable for taxes and Spain to understand whether you'll be protected by those agreements. And normally those agreements will avoid you from paying taxes on the same category. So whatever you pay in Spain, you will credit it towards paying taxes in another jurisdiction, as long as there is a double taxation agreement, which there is with USA, UK, Canada, Australia, and many, many more countries. If you want to know more about taxes, please join my taxes webinar where I go deeper into all this. But I think it is extremely relevant to talk about taxes. If you're moving to Spain under a non-lucrative visa, at least you have an overview. Now let's go to the non-lucrative visa documentation now that we have been through important considerations. First, they will ask you an address in Spain, where you're going to be moving to Spain. Depending on which consulate you're applying from, they're going to be stricter or less strict, okay? Most consulates, they will be happy you saying, I'm going to be moving to Valencia province, okay? Or Seville province, or Guipúzcoa province. Other consulates, they will ask you to give a rental contract in advance, okay? And asking my recommended expert immigration lawyer, Ainhoa Manero, about this strict requirement from stricter consulates. She says that her clients never comply with this. They never show a rental contract, okay? But of course, if you want to reduce friction or you go without legal help and you want to comply with this requirement from the stricter consulates, of course, up to you. And you can do it. Potentially, you could use an Airbnb, for example, and rent it out. Many people rent it in advance and then cancel it. There's many different strategies, but I want you to know that lawyers usually don't comply with this, and they know that it is not written in the law that you have to do this. Second, addressing the country of residence. You need to prove that you live within the jurisdiction of the consulate that will be accepting your submission. Okay. For example, if you live in Atlanta, Georgia, okay, your consulate will be Miami, and Miami works with BLS office, so you will be submitting your documents to the BLS office in Miami, right? They will ask you for your driving license, so you prove that you're a legal resident within that area of jurisdiction, right? Then you will have to prove sufficient financial means to support yourself and dependents if you're moving with family without working. Have comprehensive, compliant health insurance from a company authorized to operate in Spain. Or if you're a UK retiree, potentially you could use the S1 form instead. And that form will grant you access to public healthcare system in Spain, okay? But only UK retirees. Then show a clean criminal background check, medical certificate. If you're moving with spouses, you will have to get a new copy, original copy of your marriage certificate, because it has a certain validity period and it expires. If you're moving with children, new birth certificate copies. You will have to eventually prove that you're not going to engage in any work or professional activities in Spain, especially if you are under working age. You're young, you're not retiring, you're just taking a sabbatical year. Okay, you will face more scrutiny and you will have to go above and beyond, proving that you're not going to engage in any professional activities. Potentially, you will have to submit a letter of intent. Okay, in many consulates, this is not a requirement. In some consulates, it is. But sometimes it also is recommended to do it because you want to explain your situation. Okay, you want to explain your finances, etc. And if you're moving with children, some consulates will ask for school enrollment in advance. This is the case of Houston, for example. As I said, some of them rental contracts and photographies. Okay, that normally at BLS offices they will take a photo of you. All of you have to pay fees. Okay, for the submission. So all the members of the family, each one will have to pay fees, fill the forms, etc., etc. I have recorded 2 interviews in 2 videos of 20 minutes each with Ainhoa Manero, who I just mentioned. I highly recommend you watching these 2 videos where she answers 55 frequently asked questions about the non-lucrative visa process. And these videos are quite new, and they're very, very relevant. Now let's talk about the financial requirements in 2025. And I say 2025 because they could change any year, okay? And they have been increasing since 2004. Sometimes they stay the same, but sometimes they increase. Now, in 2025, the main applicant has to show 400% of the IPREM index, okay, of 2025, and each dependent, spouse, children, 100% of the IPREM index, okay? This translated into euros is main applicant, 28,800 euros plus 7,200 euros for each dependent. So a couple would be 36,000 euros. This is the minimum threshold, okay? Now, how do you prove your funds? It can be savings in a bank account, or could be recurrent passive income. It has to be passive, or a combination of those 2. So it could be pension withdrawals, it could be rental income, could be dividends, it could be funds available in your credit card as long as it is proven that they are liquid, easily accessible without penalties, right? And how you will show the existence of these funds via showing bank statements, okay, and documentation from your bank, wherever you have those funds. For example, the US, UK, you don't have to have a Spanish bank account, okay? Now, depending on the consulate, they will ask you a certain amount of bank statements, like 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, you name it, okay, depending on the consulate, right? And many consulates will also ask you for tax returns, especially if you're moving with dependents, okay? Now, something that you have to have in mind is that you will need double, between asterisks, the amount of the initial application for the renewal, okay? And as you probably know already, after 1 year under the non-lucrative residency, you will have to renew it for 2 more years. The thing is, you will have to prove that you will have the funds to sustain yourself without working for those 2 years, right? So some regions in Spain, and some more than regions, some provinces. So the region, for example, is Andalusia. Andalusia has 8 provinces, Almería, Málaga, Seville, right? So this depends on each province. So for example, in Valencia and Alicante, in Comunidad Valenciana, they have different requirements. Some require only one time the initial application funding threshold, and some require double in 2 years. So if you're planning with savings, you will have to have double the amount in your bank account to prove that you have enough money to survive those 2 years in Spain, right? But if you have recurring income, then recurring income will count double in a way, because you will always get this recurring income, like, for example, pension withdrawals, right? So this is the situation that I just mentioned, okay? These are people who are posting on Spainguru's groups. Then in Valencia, for example, they say you only need 1 year funds for the renewals, whereas Alicante, you need 2 years fund, okay? So this was posted by a lawyer who is all the time doing renewals in these provinces, right? In Almería, 1 year fund. This can change anytime, right? But these regional differences have a very strong impact, okay? Potentially in your plans, especially if you're close to the funding thresholds. We mentioned that the IPREM index has been growing since year 2004, and it can change any year. You can see there, this is the monthly IPREM. So now, right now, it's 600 euros times 12 is 7,200 euros. That is 100% of the IPREM, which is what each dependent needs to show. And 4 times that is 28,800 euros. And the IPREM index is an index that gets updated if the national budget gets updated. But in the last years, there was no political agreements in the Congress in Spain to update the national budget. Therefore, the IPREM index wasn't updated. But it could perfectly be updated in 2026. And normally, as you can see in the progression, it never goes down. It always goes up. So you have to budget this in, because it could go to 650 euros per month. It could go to 700 euros per month, okay? Because it hasn't been updated since 2023, right? So count on that, because if it goes to 650 euros per month in 2026, then the main applicant will go from 28.8K to 31.2K, and each dependent to 7.8K, right? And the renewals will apply the new IPREM, okay? Not only, so when I say, is the initial application funds times 1 or times 2, depending on the province? Well, think about the IPREM, because really it's the fundings thresholds are based in the IPREM, okay? Now, also we mentioned that not only the bank statements and tax returns will be asked by the consulates, but also since May 20th, 2025, many consulates started also asking additional documentation, which has been quite controversial. It put many people nervous, because they have been asking for certificates from the banks that banks in the US, UK, Canada, etc., are not used to issue, right? These certificates are common in Spain, but they're not common abroad, okay? And of course, the legislators are not thinking about that, right? So they asking things that are very difficult to comply with, and you don't have to be nervous, because this doesn't mean nobody has been denied, let's say, as far as I understand, because of not being able to comply, as long as you do all you can to provide this information, okay? Let's put it in those terms. They will ask you full bank name and address. They want to see that you're a real person and that your financial information clearly matches, that there is no fraud, okay? They want to see full account identification. They want to see the full number of your account. They want to see that your full name is next to the bank account, clearly stating that you are the owner. They want to see the account opening date and closing date, if applicable. And probably the most controversial ones: balance as of December 31st of the previous year where you're applying from. Okay, you're applying, yes. And the average monthly balance for that previous year. So they see the money, how much money you had in each month, okay, during the previous year. And many banks don't issue those certificates, right? I will show you my bank. I use BBVA. This is from my app, from my phone app. You can see I can download that thing that comes with a stamp, okay? Because they also want every certificate to be stamped, but not many banks anymore do stamps outside of Spain, but they love stamps. So if you can get stamps, definitely try to get those stamps. And here it is not loading the preview, but I have a video with Ainhoa Manero about the new documentation where she comments on each of these requirements. But what she's saying is that if you cannot comply with these requirements, try to go above and beyond to provide it, and then everything will be okay. For example, calculate yourself in an Excel the monthly average balances for your bank account for the previous year. Take that Excel, try to make it signed by the bank, okay, or try to notarize it, yes, and show it as official, to look as official as possible, and state that the bank, or make the bank state that they don't issue the certificate, but that the information is there, etc., etc. Okay, so this is the way that she's doing with her clients successfully, right? So I highly recommend you watching this video on Spainguru's YouTube channel. If you have trouble to find it, send me an email to hello@spainguru.es and I send you the link, or just go to YouTube and search Spainguru and search for the video. Another question, very, very much asked question, is: can I work remotely for non-Spanish company. And I underline remotely, and I underline non-Spanish company. So the law is extremely clear that you can't work, but they mean you cannot work in Spain. When the law that defines the Spanish non-lucrative visa was passed, there was nothing like remote work, and they weren't thinking about it, right? And they were thinking that with the non-lucrative visa, they were talking about the spirit of the law says that you should not, take jobs from the Spanish market, right? Now, about remotely for non-Spanish company, this is a gray area, right? So the law is telling you like you cannot work in Spain, right? But they don't state you cannot work outside of Spain for non-Spanish companies. They don't say it. It is a gray area. If they don't say it, it is a gray area. You can watch this short video, okay? Also, again, you have there the QR code with Ainhoa Manero talking about this, because there is a Supreme Court ruling that says someone who is working remotely under a non-lucrative visa says that this person is right and can keep the non-lucrative residency while working remotely, okay? So this precedent creates legal protection for people doing so, and I personally know, and I have known many people in the non-lucrative residency working remotely for non-Spanish companies. They are tax resident in Spain, they file their taxes, their global income is, they pay all their taxes, okay? But they don't pay Social Security in Spain, and Spanish tax authorities don't talk with immigration authorities, okay? And there's not a problem with renewals as long as you comply with the non-lucrative residency renewal conditions, which is having your funds or passive income, but not using active income, okay? Now, another thing to point out is that consulates are extremely paranoid about having the slightest doubt that you will be working even remotely for non-Spanish companies, and that will be a straight denial, okay? If you mention this or you don't prove enough that you're not gonna be working, okay? So this is another firewall or filter, okay? But really the law doesn't say this, okay? So this is the situation as of today. I'm not an immigration lawyer. This is not legal advice, okay, or tax advice or any kind of advice. I'm just stating what the lawyers, who is an experienced lawyers, say about the situation about working in Spain. And going further into this, and also stating the difference between the different consulates, there are consulates who accept people working, not remotely in the sense that, for example, the Edinburgh consulate accepts people working in the UK, depending on the nature of the work. And there is a case of someone who posted on Spainguru's Facebook group that they were approved for the non-lucrative residency, and the husband is flying over to the UK to work on an oil platform, okay, in the Northern Sea every 15 days. And there's also cases of pilots working a few days every month or every 2 months who got the non-lucrative residency. Okay, now if you are in this situation, definitely go with legal help, but it is definitely possible, okay, to have those two, to get the non-lucrative residency if the nature of your work gives you that possibility. Now, let's talk now about private health insurance requirements. Okay, so the company has to be authorized to operate in Spain, and it has to fulfill certain insurance conditions. Okay, first of all, the most important, no co-payments. Some consulates also talk about no reimbursement clauses. Okay, but it is a bit gray. Very important, no waiting periods. Okay, you need to be covered from the moment in which you enter Spain. And you have to be covered, full coverage for any type of medicine, okay, full coverage. And I add an asterisk there because there are nuances in this point. Most cases, you will have to pay a full year in advance to the company because that's what they need to issue the certificate of coverage that needs to be in Spanish, okay? So the certificate of coverage issued by the health insurance company is a requirement for the non-lucrative visa, has to have a specific wording, and it has to be in Spanish, right? Let's go to the frequently asked questions. Are the medicines cost covered under a private health insurance in Spain? Different from the US? No, they're not. You will pay retail price. Good news is that they're much, much cheaper than in the States. What should the health insurance start date be? There's many answers to this question, but the most common answer would be that when you submit your documents, okay, you will have to guesstimate when your visa will be approved, and you will ask for a visa start date in the future, right? So if you submit your documents and you say, like, I want to start the visa in about 2 months, okay, for example, January 15th, you request, or January 1st, you request your health insurance to start on January 1st, okay, so that you don't start paying for months that you haven't used, okay? This is the most common answer. Some people say that you have to have an active health insurance policy, compliant policy, at the time of submission of your documents, which is dangerous sometimes because you will be covered for the processing time without using it. But then when you start your visa validity, you will have eaten a few months. And some consulates have said, oh, but you don't have a full year coverage because you already have used 3 months, the month that it took us to issue the visa, right? And some of them, they proved that they had an automatic renewal, but some of them were not accepted. So this is a bit also full of nuances. So generally start your your health insurance the first day of the month in which you intend to move to Spain. Then, are there health insurance for older than 75 years of age? Yes, there are. For example, DKV or ADESLAS, they have compliant health insurance policies. What if I have pre-existing conditions? Now, circling back to the third condition of full coverage, right? And most people have pre-existing conditions. Now, it will depend on how severe those pre-existing conditions are. If you have had cancer diagnosed during the previous 5 years, probably you will not get compliant private health insurance coverage, unfortunately, where you have to wait longer, right? If you disclose those pre-existing conditions, which you should, okay? Because otherwise you could be accused of fraud if you don't disclose information. Now, if you have, for example, high blood pressure or, like less severe conditions, pre-existing conditions, what could happen is that the private health insurance company would exclude those pre-existing conditions, but still will be able to issue a certificate of coverage in Spanish with the right wording to be approved for the NLB. Now, when you move to Spain with your non-lucrative residency with this coverage, if you have any problems related to your pre-existing conditions, that treatment will be excluded. Okay, so have that in mind. Now, how can you protect yourself for that? And going to the next frequently asked question, can I pay into the Spanish public healthcare system? After 1 year of residency in Spain, there is a scheme called Convenio Especial, which is a bit different depending on the region because each region has their own public system. You basically pay for your access to that public healthcare system, but it takes a few weeks or even months to have real access. Therefore, don't count on that access for the first renewal. Always have a private health insurance. Okay. Now, you would pay 60 euros per month if you're younger than 65 and 157 euros if you're older than 65. But still, you will have access to public healthcare system. Any pre-existing conditions will be covered, the treatment, but the medicines cost will not be covered. So you will not have access to subsidy in your medicine costs unless you work, unless you start working and you pay your Social Security, right? Next one, can I use my current health insurance from the UK and the USA? Short answer is, if it's NLB compliant, yes. If they're authorized to operate in Spain, yes. If they're able to provide a full certificate of coverage in Spanish, yes. But usually in practice, these companies will have problems, okay? And depending on the mood, honestly, the mood or how much they investigate the official review in your case, they could find problems. For example, finding co-payment clauses, reimbursement clauses. You can find that there is not the right wording in the certificate of coverage. You will have to sworn translate the certificate of coverage into Spanish, which is expensive, okay? And it could be considered to be a travel health insurance, because of many different reasons, and therefore there could be a reason of denial. So I highly recommend you getting a Spanish company. I will now mention you Spanish companies who issue compliant health insurance policies, which tend to be very competitive, very affordable for the standards abroad. Can I apply with a UK S1 form if I am a UK retiree? Yes, you can. But since it takes time to have effective access to the public healthcare system, even if it's not a requirement, get a private health insurance to cover you meanwhile, okay? It doesn't have to be, without co-payments or anything, but get something, because you will travel to Spain, you will not have effective access, you will not be covered, okay? So even if it's not a requirement, I highly recommend you getting some sort of healthcare coverage, okay, until you get the access. Do I need a Spanish bank account to hire them? No, you don't need to. But I heard that if you have a Spanish bank account, potentially you could pay on a monthly basis and still some company will give you the certificate of coverage in Spanish, which is not common. It's not common that you have a Spanish bank account, or it's not common that they will issue that certificate of coverage without having paid the first year. Can I, and then I'm answering already, can I pay on a monthly basis? Usually not. Can there be reimbursements? This is a gray area. For example, Houston Consulate mentions that there shouldn't be reimbursements. In Venezuela, they mentioned this. In Chile, they mentioned this, okay? And really, it will depend on the officer reviewing your case that maybe they find that this is a friction point. Will I get a refund if I am denied? So it depends what policy you are buying, okay? You have to read the contract, and especially the cancellation clause, which is the refund clause. How do you cancel this in case your visa is denied? Right? So read that clause, and if you're in doubt, ask for explanations. Ask your broker, your exclusive agent, ask the company that you're engaging with. Like, what happens if my visa is denied, right? So if you work with my recommended exclusive agent, there is a full refund if your visa is denied. But it could be that the cancellation clause is, let's say, conditions, like, for example, the visa has to be denied because of the health insurance to get a refund. Or it could be a partial refund, or it could be a refund without the taxes, or it could be that we don't refund you anything, right? So be careful with that. Read the contract. What are the top companies that have the right, let's say, permit to operate in Spain? Biggest one, Adeslas. You have Asisa, DKV, ASA, Salus, Caser, Sanitas, AXA, Mafre, and several more. All these companies are reputable and good companies, okay? If size matters, Adeslas is by far the largest one with almost 30% of the market. 25% of Spaniards have private health insurance coverage. Then you have Sanitas, Asisa, and DKV in second, third, and fourth place. I could say quite easily that Adeslas is the best value for money, in my opinion, and most cost effective, and has the best coverage for its cost, okay? So yes, in general, I could say that about Adeslas. Like, Sanitas is more expensive, but they say it has potentially better coverage, okay? DKV is the same, it's more expensive. So really, but you have to shop around and compare, of course. Now, I've heard some Spainguru community members that they saw some pop-ups coming up in Washington, D.C., and also Manila, potentially other consulate or BLS websites, offering them to buy travel health insurance. Okay, so BLS is telling them, buy this travel health insurance. But remember that travel health insurance is not accepted for your non-lucrative visa. So this is extremely misleading, and I hope that BLS stops these practices, okay, because it's confusing people and it's making these people risk their non-lucrative visa application. And as you can see, I'm sorry for the noisy slide, but on the bottom left, you can see screenshots of the consulate in Washington, D.C., and on the same on the BLS page saying that no travel insurance will be accepted for the non-lucrative visa. Okay, so be careful with that, right? Now, if you want to be sure that you are buying, in my opinion, the best option out there, work with my exclusive agent for Adeslas, Mr. Carlos Blanco. He's not only an excellent exclusive agent for compliant and health insurance, but he's also an expert immigration lawyer. And not only is he an expert immigration lawyer for any immigration procedure in Spain, he's an expert in the non-lucrative visa procedure. So he understands perfectly what you're talking about timings, about potential frictions. He understands the differences between the consulates. And he has one more thing. He can extend the start date of your insurance. So imagine there is a delay. Imagine that you don't want to start your health insurance policy right away. He can extend it in the future, right? Which is something that not many companies can do. And most, they will give you 1 month in the future to start your policy, making it very narrow when you get your policy, okay, and when you to receive your documents, go and submit in your consulate, and still already start it even before you got your visa accepted. So I highly recommend you going on spainguru.es/health insurance and at least get a non-binding quote from Carlos, and then shop around if you want, compare. But I'm telling you, and that's why I work exclusively with him, that this is the one of the best options for sure for the non-lucrative visa application and for your real coverage once you are in Spain, because Adeslas is an excellent company. And here you can see some beautiful reviews out there, just a few of them, but definitely good experiences. And yes, I wouldn't be recommending anyone that doesn't have the best reputation out there. Now, let's talk about the medical certificate. The medical certificate is also health, okay, related, but it is absolutely different from the health insurance. It is a one-page document that says that you don't have infectious disease as per the protocol of 2005, right? These are like yellow fever, Ebola, these kind of things, right? It's funny that they ask you for this, because if you enter Spain as a tourist, you don't have to provide it. So you could have Ebola and still go inside Spain as a tourist and spend 89 days, okay, passing by the virus. All right, so it makes no sense. But this is a requirement for every consulate, that you supply a medical certificate that is valid for only 3 months. And it has to be valid when you apply for the visa, right? So time it correctly. Depending on the country, it will have certain particularities on how you submit it. First of all, in the UK, it has to be signed by a FCDO registered doctor, because that signature needs to be apostilled, okay? This is important. If the doctor is not registered with the Foreign Ministry of Foreign Affairs, then you cannot apostille, therefore is this not valid. Now, in the USA, Canada, Australia, and many more countries, you don't need to apostille this certificate, right? Now, another thing is, use the template with the right wording. Usually every consulate, if you search online, they will share a PDF with the template, that there are variations, okay, with the template that you can use to obtain, to be signed by the doctor, okay? Now, try to obtain a template that has the Spanish version too, and make it also signed, okay? So they sign the English version and they sign the Spanish version, because then you will avoid doing a sworn translation from English to Spanish, therefore saving some bucks, okay? Now, in the USA, Canada, Australia, and many other countries, as I said, you don't need to apostille it, but it has to be printed with the doctor's letterhead, okay, and have a stamp, okay, that shows that it is a real doctor with a registration number, and make it look official, right? And this is what you submit to the consulate, right? There are different ways to obtain this certificate. You can do it with your own doctor or medical practitioner, okay? As I said, in the UK, it has to be FCDO registered. Or you can also do it online. For example, if you use ZoomDoc in the UK, you can access ZoomDoc with a discount on spainguru.es, and you will connect online with a doctor, okay? You will submit some information, and they will issue the certificate online, okay? Then you will have to apostille it and sworn translate it. Now, potentially, you could also use a Spanish doctor, okay? Also on spainguru.es, you can contact a Spanish doctor, which has several pros and a few cons. I will tell you. The pros. First of all, if you use a Spanish doctor, you don't have to apostille it. You don't have to sworn translate it. It is fully online, okay? So you connect with the doctor online with your computer, with your phone, okay? And he asks you a questionnaire and then issues the certificate. But a few consulates apply, this is the con, A few consulates apply a strict rule, let's say, that you have to be physically present in Spain at the time of issuance of the certificate by a Spanish doctor. Okay, this is the case of Manchester, for example, Lisbon, San Francisco. Okay, but many consulates like London, Edinburgh, Miami, for example, are accepting this certificate even if you're not physically present in Spain at the time of issuance of the certificate. Okay, so the best way to know, and this is one of the frequently asked questions, to know whether your consulate accepts the Spanish doctor certificate, is you fill the form on Spainguru, I connect you with the doctor. In the form, you state which consulate you will be applying from, and the doctor will tell you, yes, my certificates have been accepted without problem at this consulate, or no, you should be present in Spain because this or that. Okay, this is an option, right? Frequently asked question: my doctor won't sign the medical certificate template. What can I do? Change doctor. 2, my doctor is not FCDO registered. Is his certificate valid in the UK? No, because you cannot apostille it, right? And this is a table that summarizes everything that I just said. You can watch it again in the recording. And just a very special case. I don't know, maybe I delete this slide for future webinars, but someone in Chicago, I just mentioned you, in the US, you don't have to apostille the certificate, medical certificate, but someone in Chicago was required to do so. Okay, so this person went, notarized the medical certificate, apostilled the notarization, okay, of the certificate, and provided this. Okay, so this happened. This was very, very strange. It was an exception, but you have to know it. Now let's talk about the clean criminal background check. Right, so usually this is a document that takes the longest to obtain, okay, in every country, usually, because sometimes the marriage certificates or the birth certificates take even longer, right? But it has to be squeaky clean during the past 5 years, okay? 0, nothing. You haven't done anything, right? Now, after 5 years, depending what you did, okay, but let's continue. In the UK, it's called the ACRO, and you will have to apostille it and sworn translate it. Okay. By the way, you have private apostille services for the UK and the US on Spainguru.es, and also recommended sworn translators. Okay. The ACRO usually has a validity of 6 months, right? And I say usually because it can change anytime, and it changes maybe by consulate. So don't go beyond that. Check the official requirements and specifications. Okay. The FBI background check also usually is valid for 6 months, and it will require a federal apostille and a sworn translation. Right? I have articles on how to get the federal apostille from the USA or even from Spain if you're outside. Am I still eligible with records on my background check? As I said, the previous 5 years, squeaky clean. Before 5 years, it will depend how severe or serious those records are, right? So if you have had conviction time, blood crimes, violent crimes, fraud, stuff like that, potentially it will be a denial, okay? Almost certainly, right? So the way to work or to apply for the visa, having this kind of records, is to go through expungement processes. So delete those because enough time has passed, but that will be according to your country's laws, whether you can do it or not. Or working with an experienced lawyer that I highly recommend you on Spainguru.es, who know how to prove to the Spanish consulate that your record should have been deleted, okay? Because in the Spanish penal law or criminal law, it should be deleted, okay? So they know how to do it. So if you are in this situation, work with an experienced recommended lawyer, okay? For sure. Am I still able with a no live trace in the ACRO? Yes, but the consulate will ask you for an extra report asking what type of record is underlying the no live trace. They want to know what was it. Can I expedite the background check federal apostille? Not officially, let's say, not as per the Department of State, but if you use Spainguru's recommended private service, they can get it to you in as short as 10 days. Okay, there is a walk-in service. Can I notarize the background check and use state apostille instead? No, don't do that. Straight denial. Where can I have my fingerprints taken? Right? In the US, you can get a form, you get wet ink, you put your fingerprints, you put it in an envelope, you send it to the FBI. This is the analogical, not recommended way. The digital way, you go to a USPS office, put your fingerprints, they scan it, okay, but those scans don't work that well, but generally work well. But also there are approved FBI channelers who are more expensive, but they are more sensitive to the fingerprints. So you will receive the digital version of your FBI background check during the same day, usually. What if my fingerprints are illegible? Send me an email, and I will send you links to relevant articles with potential solutions. And these are some screenshots. How long is taking the acro? It's taking 5, 6, 7 weeks, okay, in the UK. And still like that. This is from April, but this is what people are saying today. There is a fast service, but it's hit or miss. And in Canada, it's taking very, very fast. For example, in the US, you received, if you scan your fingerprints during the same day, the digital version, and that's enough. You print out that, and then you send it for apostille to the Department of State or a private apostille services. So it's quite quick. What it takes longer in the States is the apostille. So if you do the apostille via the Department of State, okay, which costs only $20, people are saying like fast is 3 weeks, but normally it can take 5, 6, 7 weeks to receive the apostille. Okay, so potentially use the private apostille service because it goes much faster. Okay, but of course it costs more. I think $125. Now, let's talk about proof of not working, right? And generally, this visa is also known as the retirement visa because many people who retire, who want to retire in Spain and they're receiving pensions, they would use this visa to go to Spain without working, right? So the typical and most straightforward case, okay, this is the case in which the officials ask the least amount of questions, is if you are a pensionist. If you're a retiree and you're receiving a pension, it is pretty clear that you're not going to be working, so less scrutiny, right? So if you show proof of receipt of a pension, this is enough proof of not being working. Now, if you're still working, many consulates will require you to retire, okay, or to quit, and provide a P45 form in the UK, for example. In the US, a resignation letter, termination letter from employer, both translated and notarized. If you were freelancers in the US, a notarized affidavit promising not to work, and in the UK, a letter from HMRC and accountants stating having ceased trading and the register for self-employment. Okay, and many people said that you have to do this. Okay, this is very important. Should I quit before I get the visa? This is $1 million question, okay? Is renting out we're going to answer that later on, showing people's experiences. Is renting out a property considered a job? Size matters. If you have 1, 2 properties, even 3 properties, and you're renting long-term, okay, it could be considered passive income. If you have 30 properties and you're renting them on Airbnb, that's a business, right? If you're somewhere in the middle, make sure to appoint a property manager, okay? Just to make sure that you're proving that you're not part of the operations. Is investing in stocks considered active income? No. Can I volunteer while on an NLV? Yes, if you don't get paid. Don't get paid, or you don't get invited by transport or food or anything. Just don't get anything in exchange of it. Still working at the time of application, right? So I will quote some Spainguru community members. For the UK, a P45 is one way, but so is a letter from your employer stating you have resigned and will leave on a certain date. But, Pauline said, it looks like it's a bit of a potluck if they accept a letter from HR department in place of a P45 if you're working to the last minute. And people still ask, can I still work? Can I still work? And then apply and say, I'm promised I'm not going to work in the UK. And there's no clear answer. What I see is that people submit the documents and then they receive notification saying like, you have 10 days to provide the P45, right? They don't tell you like, yeah, you will be approved if you provide it, okay? But it's something like that. Like if you haven't provided, okay, you have to do it, right? So this is something that the consulates in the UK seem to be doing. In the US, they're more open to being working to the last minute, but also I've seen different cases. It depends really on the consulate. DC consulate is quite open to this, but I've also seen quite a lot of scrutiny for younger applicants. In the Los Angeles consulate, people were just, showing the notarized letter of intent that states your plan on quitting upon obtaining the visa before leaving for Spain, okay? And this happens also at the BLS in Los Angeles, okay? But that could change anytime, right? And this person, for example, in Houston, was rejected their application because the retirement was still in the future. They said, I want to retire in the future, even if I will retire one day before of my intended visa start date request, okay? But they didn't want to take their submission, yes? And the applicant was told that they could only apply after officially retiring with an updated document. This is from June in Houston BLS. And this is also about a young couple in Washington, D.C. They required the resignation proof dated before the visa start date and the sworn statement of not working in Spain. So yeah, this is the situation about, the consulates. They want to go above and beyond about you proving that you're not working or plan to work once you're in Spain, even remotely, okay? Some people choose, or some people are required to include in the letter of intent a promise, a formal promise and signed promise that they don't pretend to work even remotely from Spain. But this is definitely, as I said, this is something that the consulates are just like going beyond their power, really, or in their interpretation. Now, another case I want to bring to your attention is the national from Venezuela who was applying for a non-lucrative visa at the Buenos Aires consulate, December 2023, which is interesting because this person went to court because this person was denied of the non-lucrative residency because of showing activity in their LinkedIn profile. This person went to court to Madrid. Madrid said that the consulate was right. This person should not have had the non-lucrative visa issued because of showing activity in LinkedIn. Okay, so be careful with all those things. Many people say that they don't Google you, they don't check, okay, but you can see there in this case that they can do it, okay? So this is a very sensitive part of the application, the work thing. Now, let's talk about marriage, birth certificates, and non-married couples. Married couples need a valid and updated marriage certificate, usually with 6 months validity. Children will also need birth certificates, 6-month validity, usually. Non-married couples can apply, but they need to prove that their relationship is real. If you can prove that you are legal partners, that's the best, strong case. Otherwise, you will be stable partners. If you can prove that you have been cohabitating for more than 1 year or you have a child together, those are strong cases, right? If they don't consider that you are a couple, then you could potentially apply as two main applicants, okay, which is worse because you have higher financial thresholds. Those certificates need to be apostilled in the country or state that issued them and sworn translated to Spanish, if applicable. What about adult children and ascendants? As of May 20th, 2025, no longer non-lucrative visa applicants can bring their adult children and ascendants. Adult children are your children over 18 years old and up to 26, if I'm not wrong. After 26, they will be considered not to be, unless they are physically dependent on you because of certain medical issues, if I'm not wrong. Now, this is the Article 61 of the Reglamento Extranjería with the underlines in red of what I just mentioned in case you want to read the law. I mentioned sworn translation very often, but what are sworn translators? Okay, let's talk about that. Sworn translators are accredited only by the Spanish Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Okay, not just that a translator can say, I will sworn translate everything. No, you need to be accredited by the Spanish Ministry of Foreign Affairs. You have to pass a very difficult exam, and you will get a unique registration number, okay, that you will sign using that number, okay? Their translations are accepted by all Spanish institutions, including Spanish consulates abroad, and translations are done remotely, so you don't have to send overseas packages with documents or anything. You just scan everything and you send an email with those documents to sworn translate. You ask for a quote, you ask for a timing to submit your the sworn translations, and then you receive the sworn translated document digitalized as an attachment in your email. You will print it out. You will have a stamp with a registration number and everything, and then you will submit that print to the consulate as part of your file. Okay, this is how you do it. And as I said, no physical mail is needed. Can I use any translator from the American Translator Association? And I've seen this in Miami Consulate and Los Angeles Consulate. They mention this association. And I've also seen some articles out there that they say, like, generally, translator from this association, the translations are accepted by Spanish consulates. But I think this is very misleading and dangerous, because only the Spanish Ministry of Foreign Affairs can appoint sworn translators, right? So if you're a translator, just like normal translator, who is part of this association, has nothing to do with the Spanish Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So it doesn't mean that your signature is valid, okay? If you're not a sworn translator and your sworn translation, your translation was accepted by the Spanish consulate, it was just out of luck, okay? Because the official reviewing your case didn't look at the signature or stamp. Okay, so be careful with that. It can be very misleading. Okay, almost as misleading as the travel insurance by BLS websites. Can a sworn translator work with several language pairs? No, they can only work with one language pair. For example, English, Spanish, Spanish, English. This is a language pair. Okay. Now you can find on Spainguru.es every language pair. For example, you got married in Germany and your document was in German and you need sworn translation for to Spanish from German. Go on Spainguru.es. I recommend you. The first recommended partner has every language pair and connects you with a sworn translator in that language pair. And it is very affordable and very quick, very easy. You just upload the document and you receive the sworn translation later on. How much do sworn translations cost? So for the usual documents needed for this visa, around 40 euros per page, about. What comes first, apostille, then sworn translation? Depending who you ask, they will tell you something different, okay? Many people don't want to sworn translate the apostille to save that money, right? But many lawyers who have in-house sworn translators, so at no extra cost, they will also sworn translate the apostille as well, okay? Because the information on the apostille is not complete, right? If it comes also in Spanish, because sometimes they come in several languages and they have an incomplete information in Spanish. So they prefer to sworn translate everything because it's all included in the cost, right? So many people avoid sworn translating the apostille, but they're taking a little risk, okay? So I'm telling you, if you want to be on the safe side, sworn translate the original document or certificate and sworn translate the apostille as well, okay? Now, some people, as I said, will only sworn translate the certificate or original document, but not sworn translate the apostille, especially if it also comes in Spanish. So this is the situation today. And especially people ask about their bank statements, because usually if you have to provide 12 months of bank statements, it's a lot of pages, right? So I have asked people what they did in terms of sworn translating the bank statements. 77% said that they didn't sworn translate the bank statements. They were in English, okay? And that's it. And nothing happened, apparently. But I'm telling you, lawyers will sworn translate everything. Now, some chose to sworn translate only the summary pages, which turns to have, let's say, best of both worlds. So sworn translate the summary. And then 3% sworn translate everything. Other people had banks who provided their bank statements in Spanish. This is the case of Chase in the US. I don't know if more banks have that possibility in the US, okay? Maybe if you use Santander also in the UK, potentially you have this possibility. I don't really know. Remember that you can watch my videos. I release one video per day, okay? On YouTube, I actually have more than 1,000 videos as of today, 24 September 2025, with half of them about the non-lucrative visa, where I always tell you a little bit, a nugget of information about the visa application, okay? And remember, there is a Q&A session after this presentation. And if you had to leave earlier today, but you think that the information that I'm sharing with you today is valuable and you learned something new today, or you think that someone else can benefit from this, please leave a review on Trustpilot about Spainguru, or if you used Spainguru.es for anything, the Move to Spain checklist or any article. If you think there is a valuable platform out there that I'm doing things well, please leave a review on Trustpilot. There is a red button there on top. It takes only 5 seconds. It will redirect it to Trustpilot. And if you say something nice, of course, I'm not going to lie to you, it also motivates me and makes me extremely happy to read those nice and kind words. So yes, let's continue now. Remember, you can ask any question about the non-lucrative visa in the chat box in the bottom right corner of your screen. Make sure to add a question mark at the end, so it's easy for me to see. I only see one question there. So yeah, it's going to be quick today. But if you ask more questions, I'm going to be happy to answer them today. Now, let's talk about during the application process, okay? All family members must apply. Consider that you have to do it in an in-person application, and consider potentially you will have to do an in-person pickup with all the applicants. But certain offices, BLS office, you pay, a prepaid envelope and they will send it to you home. But not all the offices have this option, so always check this out, especially if you live far away. Some consulates will only work by mail. For example, Panama Consulate. Some consulates use a combination or give you the option to do an in-person or not, okay? Some consulates are changing. For example, Melbourne Consulate just changed from only by mail to an in-person submission right now, this month. So yeah, be careful with that. And also something that just changed is that usually the non-lucrative visa granted you a 90-day window, okay, of validity to enter Spain. After that, the visa expired, okay? But now they are issuing the visa with a 365 validity window, okay? Which is great because a lot of people took a long time to obtain the residency card and they were left with nothing, without a visa, without a residency card, and stuck in Spain. Now the visa, now with a validity of 1 year and with a number of entries, multi-entry, you can see on the right on the screenshot, multi, you can use this visa to go in and out of Spain, all right? Even if you don't have the TIE card. Now, once you obtain the TIE card or residency card, plastic card, the visa expires, okay? It's no longer valid, right? Now, there is a question that people are asking, like, should I still enter within the first 90 days or not, right? So I released this video with Ainhoa from Stern Abogados, and I released one update last week, okay? Because she asked the authorities to say officially what people has to do, and she still didn't receive an answer. But there is an official document saying that people still should enter Spain within the first 90 days, even if their visa is issued for 1 year. But then the consulates are answering emails and saying, no, you can enter anytime after 1 year, right? So there is a little bit of confusion. So basically, again, if you want to be in the safe side, try to go to Spain within the first 90 days, but apparently nothing is happening if you are moving to Spain after those initial 90 days if you have a 1 year validity visa, okay? So people have not been denied of getting the residency card so far. So we are very early stage to confirm all this. So as I said, safe side, enter within 90 days, but if you're not doing it right now, we don't know anyone who has had any problem because of doing so. Okay, and this is what I just said to summarize it. Common mistakes to avoid: not checking specific consular requirements and talking in general about the visa application, right? A lot of people just read things online, just listen to people like me, watch YouTube videos. The most important is that you read the official requirements. The problem with this is that there are many requirements and they can perfectly not match. For example, you read the requirements on the consulate page in English, in Spanish, and sometimes the lists are different. You use BLS office requirements as well, and maybe there are a bit different. And sometimes people go to apply and they're asked to provide documents or information that was not listed anywhere, okay? And that's why it's great to also read the first-hand experiences from people who are applying at your consulate. So all these things you need to have in mind. And also learning from someone's case who was saying that this person was checking every 15 days all those requirements, and he saw things that couldn't see the previous time, maybe because they changed, maybe because they updated the website. So unfortunately, I have to tell you that this is quite dynamic and you have to pay attention to it, and you need to be constantly updated, okay, until you submit your documentation, right? Another common mistake to avoid: wrong documents, expired documents outside of their validity period, wrong chronology. Start with the easy stuff and leave the hard stuff at the end, okay? Wrong health insurance, not compliant, okay? Having co-payments, for example. Say that you plan to work or not enough proof, or don't convince them enough that you're not going to be working, okay? And this is very, very clean, very clear, and very sensitive. Be careful with this, okay? Especially if you're young. And if you say in your letter of intent, oh, I have $1 million in the bank. I want to spend one sabbatical year in Spain, and then I want to go back to the States and work. If you say that in your letter of intent, there's a very high chance you get denied, even if that is perfectly right. And there's nowhere where it says that this should be a reason of denial, okay? But I've seen cases of this happening. So be careful with that. I'm not telling you to lie, but frame it the correct way, okay? And be honest, but don't say things that will go against you. Unfortunately, the authorities push you to take this style, but this is something that you need to have in mind. Let's talk about timing. When do you start with all this? USA, Canada, UK, at least 5 months before, okay, your intended date to move to Spain. For gathering documents, leaving enough time to get an appointment and submission, processing time, etc., right? Most consulates will retain your passports, consulates or BLS offices, okay? Some consulates, like Manchester, for example, now, they have a form saying like where you can ask to keep your passport while the visa is processing, okay? But not all the consulates have this. Now, US applicants, it's quite easy that they get a second passport while they leave the passport at the BLS office during processing. But in the UK, it's hard to get a second passport, or impossible even, okay? So check out whether you have the possibility, if you need to get to keep your passport while processing, but don't count too much on it. Documents preparation usually take about 2 to 3 months. Attending the appointment on the 3rd month, wait for approval, can take from a few days to more than 3 months, okay? Sometimes they will ask you for extra documentation and will only give you a 10-day period to provide it. So if you know that you are submitting something that is wrong, work fast to get it right, because potentially you will get the request to provide it and you will not have time to do it. And these are things that are changing now in terms of timings, but it used to be that you can choose your visa start date in a 90-day window from the application date. And officially, you will have 30 days to obtain your residency card once in Spain, once you enter Spain. That will be valid for 1 year, and then you will have to renew it. First renewal, right? And someone said, you can ask for the visa to be valid for up to 3 months in advance. However, the difficulty I found was finding a health insurance company who would work that far out, as most only do 2, and now I can safely say only do 1. Okay, so be careful with that. Solution, potentially work with Spainguru's recommended exclusive agent, okay? And this is a way to see the time frames and how the process works. Each segment is 1 month. So you submit your paperwork, your papers on date A, and you ask the consulate if you're going to approve it, please approve it on a certain date, okay? Up to 90 days in advance, right? Now imagine the consulate approves you the visa before the date that you chose, and they decide to grant your wish, okay? And they start the visa in the date that you chose. They start your visa during a certain date, and then it will be valid for 1 year. But as we said before, safe side, enter Spain within the first 90 days, okay? I'm not telling you to do it, not legal advice, but be careful until we clarify that, yes? And then you enter Spain sometimes before those 90 days pass. And once you enter Spain, you have 30 days to officially get your TA card, which nobody can do it in 30 days because there are no appointments at the police stations. Now, normally, when you enter Spain on a certain date, and then the police officer that gives you the residency card will put the date of entry in Spain as the start date of your TA card, even if you get your TA card 3 months after, right? So the first date in your TA card, after 1 year, there is the expiration date. So you can start renewing your TA card or your residency 60 days before the expiration days in your TA. and up to 90 days after the expiration date. Okay, but don't wait for that. Start your renewal 59 days before the expiration date, because it can take time. You could get a denial, you can get problems, and then you will be left without residency permits, and you will be, let's say, in an irregular situation. Okay, so never wait until the last moment to do it, and get that digital certificate to do it. Okay, this is a digital signature that you can submit your documents online for official procedures, which you can do online for renewal, and you will need a digital certificate. Okay, after you obtain your TIE, with the TIE, you can obtain the digital certificate to install in your computer, so you can do it. Now, let's talk again about the application process in a different way to say it. And this is for illustration purposes only. It can be different. Things can overlap. Things can come before and after. Take it with a pinch of salt. First, find your consulate. Second, check the official requirements. Third, start with the harder, longer things, usually the police checks. Next, obtain your medical certificates. Think that it has a 3-month validity. Then apostille what you need to apostille and sworn translate what you need to sworn translate. Get your private health insurance or S1 form if you're a K pensionist. Book your appointment at the consulate. Be careful, it takes time to get it. Attend the consular appointment or BLS appointment and submit your document. Wait for the processing of your visa. Pick it up or receive it. Travel to Spain. Obtain the empadronamiento, which is the registration of your address, of your rental contract at the city hall, which gives you a proof of address, and then request your residency card showing that empadronamiento and other documentations within 30 days officially of entering Spain. Another way to see it is a Gantt chart. You can see the validity periods in purple and when you should get it, right? So this takes about 11 months, yes? So you will start in February to get the police checks, then sworn translate and apostilles. Then on the 3rd month, you will get financial documents, medical certificates, start trying to get the appointment, health insurance at the end, okay? And then submit your documents during the application, then travel to Spain, start your visa, your health insurance coverage, okay, and get your residency card. Some updates, okay, some late updates. Applications must now be submitted no later than 2 months before your planned arrival date in Spain, unless exceptional reasons justify a shorter time frame. You can submit your application as early as 6 months and up to 2 months prior to your intended entry date. These are things that are changing as we speak, okay, and depending the consulate, they are applying them or not, okay. So in summary, the decision deadline, they will, if after 1 month you didn't get a decision, okay, you can start a legal procedure to obtain a formal answer, okay. That's what it means. It doesn't mean that you were denied. It means that you can start the legal procedure to get an answer, right? Technically, it is a default rejection. It is a silencio administrativo negativo, okay? But in practical stance, it is not a rejection. It's just that they're taking longer, and they will take longer, okay? So this is the situation today. This is the rule that states all this that I just show you. But one thing is the rule, the theory, let's say, and another thing is what happens at the consulate that are trying to keep up with all these changes and this, let's say, shorter time frames. All right. So they will take some time to adapt to these new rules and regulations. Going back to taxes, what happens if you sell your home, especially? Many places where you are from don't even have capital gains tax. So what's the best you can do to avoid capital gains tax in Spain if you sell your home? Don't become a Spanish tax resident during the same Spanish tax year in which you sell your home. As we know from before, tax years start on January 1st, December 31st, calendar years. So if you sell your home in December 31st and you move to Spain in January 1st, you're happy because you're not going to become a Spanish tax resident the same year in which you sold your home, right? This is the easiest way to see it, right? Or if you sell your home the same year in which you moved to Spain, be careful, spend less than 183 days during that calendar year, because if you spend more, it works retroactively. If you sell your home on January 1st, 2025, you get your visa, you travel to Spain in June, yes, and you spend every single day until the end of the year, making it more than 183 days, then you became a Spanish tax resident since January 1st, that same year. And therefore, the sale of your home is a taxable event, and you will have to pay capital gains tax for your home, which is taxed at progressive rates from 19% to 30%. Okay, so careful with that. And of course, there are ways to mitigate capital gains tax if you're older than 65, if you use the proceeds of your sale of your primary residence, investing, buying a new home in Spain, blah, 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 blah. But the best is to avoid it by timing your move to Spain. If you want to know more about this and many other things related to taxes in Spain, I have a lot of blog posts on Spainguru.es that I highly recommend you to read. Now, let's go after the approval. Now, remember Schengen, 29 countries, internally borderless zone? Pay attention to it, because if you fly from a Schengen country into Spain, you will not get a stamp from a Spanish authority, okay? And if that happens, when you go to get your residency card, the police officer can perfectly say, whoa, you don't have an entry in Spain. How do I know when did you enter here? You had to get out of Schengen zone and come back. Yes, that has happened. This is the worst case scenario, but it happened, okay? In that situation, the best you can do is to obtain a declaración de entrada, which is a one-page document that looks like this, and I have an article on how you file it, but the best is, you download it from Spainguru, you print it, you fill it up yourself, and when you arrive to a Spanish airport from outside of Spain, but from within Schengen, for example, Frankfurt, if you fly from Frankfurt to Madrid or from Paris to Barcelona, you go to the nearest police station at the airport, for example, or next to the border, you make it sign, okay? And then when you get your residency card, you have a proof of entry into Spanish territory, okay? Now, if you enter from outside of Schengen, it's fine. If you fly from New York to Madrid directly, it's fine because you will get immigration control and you will get a Spanish stamp from the authorities, okay? So this is important, right? There are a few other steps that I highly recommend you following if you're entering Spain. And you can also find those steps if you go. I'm going to go to screen sharing for 1 second. I will show you Spainguru because I'm very, very proud of this move to Spain checklist. Okay, if you look at the checklist, you can start 1 year before. Okay, moving 3 to 6 months, 0 to 6 months, arrive in Spain. After you arrive in Spain, if you go after you arrive in Spain, you have all the steps of all the things you need to pay attention to. Empadronamiento, get your TA card, open a Spanish bank account, settle in and join the community, obtain a digital certificate, set up your phone service. All this with articles related to it, so you know exactly what to do when you arrive in Spain. Okay. And I'm still updating it. Okay, it takes a long time, and I should add the certificado de entrada there, actually, the declaración de entrada. Now, we mentioned get a Spanish SIM card. They're gonna send you SMS for your procedures, legal procedures. So it's good that you receive them. Your confirmations for your appointments, etc. You need a Spanish SIM card. You need to keep your American, UK, Canada phone number. And make sure that you receive also SMS, 2FA messages, so you can still control your bank accounts in your origin countries and other services. And of course, stay in touch with your family and friends. Open a non-resident bank account. You can go to any brick and mortar bank in Spain. Most of them will offer you a non-resident bank account that you will need to pay your rent, to pay your bills, to pay your gym, etc., etc. So it's very useful that you do it. And once you obtain your residency card, you can change the status of your non-resident bank account into a resident bank account, making it more, cheaper or for free. Obtain an empadronamiento. Be careful because rental contracts of less than 6 months usually will not be accepted, but it is depending on each ayuntamiento or city hall, the rules on how they do the empadronamiento. Okay, so be careful. Always rent a place, making sure that you have the permission of the landlord to get your empadronamiento. Okay, because the empadronamiento will be asked in 90% of cases for several things, among them the TIE card or tarjeta de residencia, which is, you go to the police station or foreign office and you put your fingerprints, you show your visa, you show your entry date, okay, to Spain, and they will issue the residency card, okay, that you need to renew after 1 year of its expiration. Okay, it started 60 days before, right? So this is important. Okay, now, is the padrón strictly necessary to obtain the TIE card? And it is not, but in 90% of cases, they will ask you, okay, in practice. There are no appointments to obtain the TIE. What should I do? Okay, this is also a big bottleneck. And many people state this, that they're very hard to get. This couple was living in Valencia and is taking 4 months to get it. And they're getting very paranoid. But now that the visa is valid for 1 year, you're still fine and you should not get too nervous. But a lawyer says that usually people can take several months to obtain the TIE appointment. You can go to any police station within the same province, okay? And, potentially, you take a car or you take a bus and you go to another police station that is not immediately next to yours. And maybe there is an appointment there so you can get your TIE card. So the earlier you can do it, the better, but don't get too nervous because everybody, unfortunately, goes through this bottleneck. And the empadronamiento, technically, it is not required. What you need to show is proof of address. And sometimes Airbnb receipts, Booking.com receipts, or a rental contract work, okay, depending on the police station. And the big police stations know this. But if you go to a smaller police station, they will want the empadronamiento, even if they don't know the rule, okay? But of course, you don't want to add friction with the police, okay? But you see, try to get the empadronamiento. It's very, very important that you get it. And for the renewal, you will be required officially to have an empadronamiento. And the renewal comes quite fast, the first renewal, because it's only for 1 year. Renewal process, when and where and when. Year one, the moment you enter Spain within the visa period, the first year started. And this is also a commonly asked question. Can you enter as a tourist before the visa validity start date? The answer is yes, if you don't need a Schengen visa, okay? You can enter as a tourist, but it can bring several unwanted effects. For example, the police officer can say that you didn't get during the visa validity period. You can get your residency starting when you enter as a tourist, and that's something that you miscalculated, because you can enter, you can spend 90 days as a tourist in a 183 80 days period. So be careful with that. The best is to enter within the visa validity period. The first renewal will be for 2 years, okay? And depending on the province where you're renewing, you will have to show double the amount if savings, okay? And again, the funding requirements can be proven as savings or recurrent passive income or a combination of both. The funds need to be readily available without penalties. This is important. And then the second renewal will be for years 4 and 5, totaling 5 years, after which you can go for the long-term residency. You need to apply for it. It's not automatic. And there is a minimum stay requirement for the long-term residency as well. Now, there's some changes as of May 20th, 2025. There is a new minimum stay requirement of 183 days in order to renew any temporary visa, among them the non-lucrative visa. Okay, and this is for the immigration year, which is a natural year. Okay, so many people say, oh, this is because they want you to become a Spanish tax resident. And the fact is that it is not really true. You don't have to become immediately a Spanish tax resident in order to renew your non-lucrative visa. First of all, because the tax year and the immigration year don't overlap necessarily. One is a calendar, the other one is natural year. Second thing is because there is a Supreme Court ruling stating that the Reglamento Extranjería, which is lower in hierarchy, should not include a minimum stay requirement for renewals. This requirement should be in the main organic law. Therefore, this requirement is not legal. This is what the Supreme Court says. And I have videos with Ainhoa Manero of Stern Abogados where she's saying this, and she's saying that the same way that the initial minimum stay requirement of 180 days that it used to be before was taken off, the same happens with this new 183-day requirement. Therefore, you have strategies to come under the non-lucrative visa and not become a Spanish tax resident right away and still being able to renew. Be careful, because if your plan is to stay for the longer term, okay, either to apply for citizenship, for long-term residency, you have other minimum stay requirements that you need to comply with, okay? Be careful with that. Those requirements overlap. But if we're only thinking about the renewal of the non-lucrative visa, this minimum stay, the Supreme Court says that it shouldn't be there, okay? So be careful with that. There's a legal ambiguity with that. Watch the videos, watch the interviews that I have, because as I remind you, I'm not a legal expert, I'm not an immigration expert, so better to hear this from expert immigration lawyers who tell you the right wording and the right nuances of this. Let's talk about a case study for the renewal. Imagine there is a couple. We're in 2025. If PREM hasn't changed, they need to provide 36,000 euros, okay, for the initial application. But now they're in a province that they need to show double the amount. That is 72,000 euros. Now, the main applicant has a 30,000 annual pension, annual. That means this is passive income, right? That means that in a year, they get 30,000, but in 2 years, they will get 60,000. They need to prove that they have certain amount for 2 years. So this person has 2 years to get the money. So 30,000 the first year plus 30,000 the second year, this person has 60,000 euros proven only by this pension. So they just need to complete this with 12,000 euros, which could be savings, could be dividends, could be credit card credit, readily available without penalties, could be potentially rental income. But be careful. What about rental income? It's not widely accepted, as I've been hearing lately, because many authorities say that the tenant can stop paying, it's not safe income. But there are also people who are only using rental income for the renewals without problems, okay? So this is a little bit hit or miss about the rental income, right? Documentation requirements. You need to renew your visa. Ongoing private medical insurance coverage, okay, without gaps. Be careful with that, especially if you plan to use the public healthcare convenio especial after 1 year, you will certainly get a gap. Always renew for the first renewal your private health insurance, okay, so you don't get any gap, okay, make them overlap, and maybe for years 4 and 5 renewal, you will use the convenio especial, okay? Or if you have access to public healthcare system from scratch, you can also use it instead of private health insurance, case of UK retirees, using the S1 form. Updated passport copies for both individuals, ongoing health coverage, as we said, and no police records, no Spanish police records, okay? Like driving under the influence, stuff like that. There's been denials of people getting records in Spain, okay, for their renewals. And as I said, 90% of cases that will require the empadronamiento, okay, for the renewal. In this case, it is much more clear than the initial TA card. Now, let's talk about the minimum stay requirements for the different plans that you have, okay? And remember, if you plan to stay in Spain for the long term, always consult with an immigration expert who can set up a strategy for you to comply with everything you need to comply with in order to hit your long-term goals in Spain. Sorry for the long sentence, but it's very, very important. A lot of people say like, oh, I need a lawyer just to submit the documentation for my NLV. That's it. But then they want to stay in Spain and become, and get the Spanish passport. You have so many things to pay attention to. So it's important that you are legally informed about the strategies, because there's so many rules that, come at the same time or overlap. And one of the things is the minimum stay requirements for the different things. As we said, there is legal ambiguity about the minimum stay of 183 days in an immigration year to renew the non-lucrative visa. If you plan to apply for a long-term residence, you should not have been outside of Spain in the previous 5 years before applying for the long-term residence for more than 10 months, okay? Those 10 months don't need to be consecutive, but they cannot be more than 6 months in one single block, right? Sometimes there is a possibility of renewing for third extraordinary renewal of non-lucrative residency, but not all regions accept this. For example, Galicia doesn't accept it, and I don't have a list of who accepts and who doesn't. Then if you plan to apply for the nationality, there are other conditions, okay, for the long-term residence application, but we're talking about minimum stay requirements, okay? Nationality, if you're going to apply for the Spanish passport, if you're a holder of a Latin American passport, Philippines, and other specific countries, you can apply for the Spanish citizenship as fast as 2 years. This is called the 2 years fast track of legal residence in Spain. If you are in this situation, don't be outside of Spain more than 3 months per each year before applying for the Spanish passport. And if you're a holder of a long-term residency, you should not be outside of the EU for more than 1 year consecutively, or no more than 30 months in 5 years. Okay. Now let's talk about common paths for transitioning to work permit after 1 year. Okay. Of course, you can come to Spain via a work permit in a Spanish consulate, but it is hard to obtain. It is hard to obtain. It is easier to transition from a non-lucrative residency into a work permit. Okay. And the way to do it is always renew your non-lucrative residency before applying for the work permit. Why? Simply because if you get denied your work permit, you still have your non-lucrative residency and you are legally in Spain for the next 2 years, right? Now, the common pathways, these are not the only ones, but the common pathway is if you want to start your own business, this is cuenta propia, work permit. You present a business plan, you have to get it approved, and then you will start your own business, your work permit for starting your own business. Or you get sponsored by a company, you get a job offer, a job contract, and this is for cuenta ajena. This is a work permit. I'm not saying that this is easy, and many people criticize me because maybe the wording that I choose makes it feel that you have the right to get a work permit after 1 year of non-lucrative visa. No, it is not like that. You need to comply with the requirements. You're going to go through scrutiny, and potentially you will get a work permit modification from a non-lucrative residency. Now, there is a third way, which is controversial as well, which is transitioning from non-lucrative residency to a digital nomad visa, okay, or to a worker's permit, right? Which is controversial because you need to prove at least 3 months of remote work activity, okay, which you shouldn't have had if it wasn't because if it's a gray area with a non-lucrative residency. But people are transitioning from non-lucrative residence to digital nomad residency, and this is happening successfully, right? As I mentioned, those countries in red have the advantage of being able to apply for Spanish citizenship after only 2 years of legal residency in Spain. And of course, the non-lucrative residency counts towards this. But generally, countries that are in gray, USA, okay, Canada, etc., have to wait 10 years to be eligible to apply for Spanish citizenship by residency. Of course, there are other ways to obtain the citizenship, but those are the ones. Remember, you can use Spainguru.es for absolutely free. Everything is free, except if you decide to engage with a private paid consultation or package from one of my vetted partners. Otherwise, everything else on Spainguru, it is free. Join my weekly newsletter, watch my YouTube videos, read my blog posts, join the Facebook groups and Reddit communities, join the Spanish Non-Lucrative Visa group today with almost 24,000 members. And remember, you can join my other 5 webinars: taxes, digital nomad, move to Spain, Q&A session for NLV, Portugal visa, golden visa, and the move to Spain checklist and destinations in Spain, all that for absolutely free. And if you decide to engage with Spainguru's vetted partners, I have personally vetted all my partners. I recently updated my services page where you can find everything you need for your visa, like immigration lawyers, sworn translators, apostille services. If you come from Puerto Rico, you have specific advice. You have here some wonderful reviews, health insurance, as I said, medical certificates, UK doctors, medical certificate from Spanish doctors, and so much more. Tax experts, accountants, US tax filings, financial planners, mortgages, bank and money transfers. Learning Spanish, very important. International moving quotes, parcel shipping, driving Spain, etc., etc., etc. And if you plan to stay in Spain for a longer term, definitely learning Spanish here you can find. So all these have been personally vetted by me. I highly recommend you at least checking it out, and maybe there's something useful there for you. I'm sure you will find something interesting that can help you out to move to Spain and settle in. And you can always stay in touch with me at hello@spainguru.es. Now we can move to the Q&A session now. If you had to leave earlier for any reason, don't forget to leave a nice review on Trustpilot if you want. It makes me extremely, extremely happy and motivates me so much to keep on going and helps others find this information. Now let's go with the Q&A session. Thank you so much for the people who made it till the end. Let's go. Let's see. Okay, display. Joe, thanks for joining today. I am coming up for my 5th year in LV renewal permanent residency. Originally applied for the from the US. Do I need to show financial support? Do I need Form X17? So this is for permanent residency, right? You're applying for the long-term residence, okay, also known as permanent residency after 5 years. So this is, if we go to the screen sharing, we go to Permiso de Larga Duración España, right? So there are two. Autorización de residencia de larga duración nacional, right? So this is it. Here you can see everything that you need. All the things you need. The models and everything, okay? You just search for this, no? Permiso de larga duración España. Do you have UE, okay, European Union, or you have larga duración España, right? So you search that and you have the official requirements. Not an expert in this application, so I'm just answering you this way. Sorry, I'm not trying to avoid your question, but you know, I prefer that you check the official requirements. I don't go through the specifics, forms, and everything because it is not definitely my strength. Now let's go with the next. But happy for you that you made it for 5 years and that you changed to long-term residency because it is much better residency type than the non-lucrative residency. Definitely less things to prove. But yeah, you need to not show that you have an interrupted residency in Spain, show that you have no gaps in your private in your full health insurance compliance. You have to show that you have not been outside of Spain more than 10 months in the previous 5 years. But as far as I understand, you don't need to show the private health insurance for the future. You don't need to show financial requirements, etc., etc. If that gives a general overlook on how it is. How long does it take? First of all, Dominique, thank you for joining today and asking something. How long does it take to approve the NLV? I have several booked travels to Italy and other countries from November to December since I have 1 year Schengen visa, multiple entry issued by Spain. Do I need to move within 90 days after getting the NLV? So I went through some of the things that you're asking. How long does it take to approve the NLV? Depends on the consulate. It depends on the time of the year. It depends on how much staff they have reviewing the cases. It depends on so many factors. I've seen it the fastest 5 business days in Miami. That's the fastest I've seen. But I've seen people go beyond those 90 days legally required to give you an answer. As I said, now you can start a procedure after only 1 month if you haven't received an answer. But yeah, you should not be very. You have to be very cautious and you have to be very flexible because the visa processing can be anything. You can join the Spainguru Facebook group, and ask the late developments, let's say. And generally for timings, what I would recommend, people are asking all the time. Let me see. Change screen. I'm going to change my screen and go to the Facebook group. So, for example, Facebook. For these kind of things, I highly recommend you going on the Spanish non-lucrative visa, mention your consulate, and ask like, how long is it taking to get your answers? People will say it took 3 weeks last month. It took. I'm still waiting after 12 weeks. It's crazy how different it is. Okay, but this is how you can also use the group. You can also use the search tool and search here, for example, Manchester. Okay, people are getting crazy in Manchester and asking a lot this question. How long is it taking? Will it be 10 weeks waiting? Okay, in Manchester, this person has posted in September 22nd, right? People are asking this all the time for Manchester for some reason, because it's taking long in Manchester. So yeah, let's go to the next question. Love. Oh, you've been to several webinars. Thank you for joining this one too. After your first year with the NLV, how difficult it is to renew for the new 2 years? Usually the renewal is much easier. It's done online. People face technical difficulties, but the renewal is much easier than the initial application. This is the general opinion, right? But yeah, since many people choose to do it themselves, you can do it via gestor or an immigration lawyer that does it for you with their own digital signature. That is the easiest, okay? But if you do it yourself, you need to get a digital certificate in order to sign your documents. You will do it online. Most in some provinces, for example, they only let you do it online. They don't want you to go to extranjería office. People who do it in person in extranjería office are in the minimum share of people, and they face more difficulties than doing it online. Online seems to be quite simple as long as you don't face technical issues, okay? And some people are posting on the group about those issues, but generally people end up being able to renew quite easily as long as you comply with the requirements. Always plan ahead and apply for the renewal 60 days before the expiration date of your TIE. So in case you have any hiccups in the process, you still have days left to reapply and solve the issue or potentially get legal help for it. Now, let's go with the next question. Joe, I'm coming for the NLB renewal. Do I need to show financial support? And as I understand, it's not a renewal of the NLB. This is a long-term residency application. And as far as I understand, you don't need to show financial means for the long-term residency application in Spain, as far as I understand. I'm not a legal expert, and this is not legal advice. Remember always. Am I going through questions that were already asked? Maybe yes. Or this one was asked several times. Or maybe I've been through all of them. Yes, I think I've been through all the questions. Thank you. You answered during the interview. Thank you. My questions were answered. Oh, probably I was talking here alone. Well, thank you so much for being until now. Remember, there's a link there to Trustpilot if you want to leave a review, and you will receive a recording of this webinar soon in your inboxes. And there's an NLV Q&A session. Also, just, it's a candid conversation where people join with their cameras and microphones and ask questions about their procedures. If you go here to move to Spain, webinars, you can join all these webinars. The Non-Lucrative Visa live Q&A is next Wednesday, October 1st. So in a few days, you can join this, and then we can always chat and ask any questions. And of course, you can go to Spainguru's NLV group, which is very big and has a vibrant community and it's very, very active. And yeah, definitely ask your questions there from the community, but never forget that consulting with an immigration lawyer can also really, really help you in your application. Thank you so much for joining today. I'll send you the recording very soon. And I wish you a great week. Stay in touch and goodbye.
Oh, and one more thing. Apparently YouTube says you're gonna love watching this video right here. I think you should watch it.